At this time, we'd like to bring forward, let's see, we have Mr. Wilbanks, who is the superintendent, the CEO, superintendent of Gwinnett County Public Schools. I had the pleasure of working with him and for years, and what a dedicated gentleman. The largest school system in Georgia and one of the largest in the nation. Very diverse, and I don't want to take his thunder, but we're just glad he could give his time and come out here today and talk with us about his involvement in this. So, Mr. Wilbanks, without any further delay, thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Chairman Hughes, thank you, and fellow committee members for giving us the opportunity today to come and hopefully shed some light on some of the real facts about Common Core. And I'll probably go back to that and sort of walk you through some of the things that would like for you to know. There are a lot of misinformation about what happened, what didn't happen, who did what, whatever. I'll see if I can streamline a little bit of that as I move through this. First of all, I think one of the things that probably has been missing in the debate and the discussion about Common Core is the fact that there wasn't enough of information about the difference between standards and curriculum. You all have got at least enough semester's credit here on that today, so hopefully that's a little bit clearer to you. In addition, the other thing that I think has not been fully discussed is that the Common Core standards were really a genesis out of the governor's conference. Each governor that's chairman of the governor's conference every year has a theme, what they work on. And quite frankly, the genesis of Common Core probably come out of a 2005 initiative on redesign high schools when Mark Warner, Virginia, was chair of the governor's conference. Because that's the first time that they really came together to really talk about the states working together on educational issues that would move all states forward. And they particularly chose redesign of high schools, and the big emphasis then was on graduation requirements. As you know, that was a hodgepodge. Move fast forward to 2009 when Common Core became the initiative of the National Governors Association, and particularly the Center for Best Practices. That's the sort of educational arm of the National Governors Conference. And the work that they did was intended to be voluntary by states, and you actually could adopt only 85% of the, quote, Common Core standards and still say that you're doing Common Core standards. You don't have to adopt all of them. And some of the discussion that Dr. Rycroft led you through in terms of comparing Georgia's performance standards with the Common Core standards. A lot of that work reached down to the classroom level. Teachers would obviously be given the opportunity to comment on that. I have documents with me today where we sent in, we being Gwinnett, and I'm sure I'm not going to stand here and speak for other systems, but they had the opportunity to do that, for teachers to weigh in on, tell us the difference between what you prefer from what the Common Core standard calls for versus what the Georgia Performance Standards call for. And as they talked about the Fordham study that was done, I actually think Georgia received a B+ rating in terms of how Georgia's standards compared to the Common Core standards. So there wasn't that much of a change in the adoption, but there was some. That they are higher, that there are fewer of them. They're higher and more rigorous, and I think they really engage students in a greater depth of understanding, both conceptually as well as being able to apply that. So moving forward, as we really began to look at the Common Core standards, there were two times in 2010 after they had put the standards together. Now, I think all of you know that the governors didn't sit around the table as you all are and do this. They obviously have staff of both the Governor's Conference as well as the Council of Chief State School Officers. They had staff that do that, as well as they actually employed another agency to do the collection, the writing, take in the input. Now, that input actually started from the review of the 6 states that Dr. Rycraft mentioned to you, Georgia and Massachusetts being 2 of them, where they use language arts and mathematics standards. They actually used the standards that had been worked on by several associations, one of them being the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which had been working on increasing standards for a number of years. The National Council of Teachers of English. We call it language arts, but some of us were in school when it was called English, not language arts. But in any case, that along with the American Federation of Teachers, they work on standards. So the Council of Great City Schools, they worked on standards. So they used all of those standards that had been worked on by other agencies, and that was part of the consolidation in coming up with the Common Core standards. And I thought I would throw that out to add to your knowledge in that respect. In addition, as we move a little bit further on in 2010, there were 2 times that when they came out that there were 2 drafts of the Common Core standards that were written where they called for input. Now, that input was sent to the states through the State Department of Education, and I'm making the assumption that that went to every state, and the state then sent that out to the local school districts to get input. I know we participated in that and actually have copies of what we sent into the state, and that went down to the teacher level. I never were asked, never participated in any of those specific reviews. That was done by our teachers. That would then be collected by our curriculum department, be sent back to the State Department, and that was sent back to the committee doing the writing. So there were at least 2 opportunities where a broad range of people had the opportunity to provide input to the final version of the development of Common Core standards. In May of 2010, they completed that, and they rolled out the official edition of the Common Core standards in June. As a matter of fact, there were two events in the nation that they chose to do that with, and one of them, Governor Perdue and Governor Markell, were the 2 governors working with this. Governor Perdue's office called us to see if we would host that rollout here in Georgia, one of them in the nation. We did. We did it on June the 2nd, 2010 at Peachtree Ridge High School. It was in the auditorium. It was full. There were people there from all over the country. It consisted of a variety of people. But here's a point that would like for you to understand. There was no one, not a single individual from the U.S. Department of Education there. I saw the invitation list, and to my knowledge, there were none invited. I put that out to say this is not something that was pushed down by the U.S. Department of Education. Okay, this was an initiative of the governors, the chief state school officers, to really provide standards that would be across states where when students moved, but more than just that, it was to really raise not just the rigor, but raise the engagement of students in really having a true understanding of mathematics and language arts. And I think our teachers here would agree with the fact that we talk about a lot of gateways, but there are actually two gateways for students. One of them is language arts, being able to read. If a student can't read, they're going to have difficulty throughout their school experience. And then the mathematics. If they can't do mathematical computation, don't understand mathematical concepts, they're going to have a tough time with the sciences and the other areas. So those are the two important areas, and obviously the areas that they thought would be the least offensive to anybody in the nation. How can you make math political? Well, there are a few ways, evidently. But in any case, what they were trying to do again is to have a set of standard common across states. And I don't want to repeat a lot of the information that's been given. They did a great job, but I think, Martha, it was you that said, how can algebra be different in Georgia or California or Washington or Maine? Algebra's algebra. But in any case, the Common Core Standards was a real push by the nation's governors, the chief state school officers, to have that commonality across states. Now, moving on then to some of the other information about Common Core, and I will not go over what I know has been talked about, but there were a lot of committees that were involved with the final draft, the final writings before they were approved. I think at one time they being the committee that was putting together the final standards, said they had over 10,000 comments about the final version of them. That didn't include the comments that they had gotten from the others. But in any case, those standards were approved. The states began to approve those, and I think Georgia did it in July of 2010. And there was already a lot of efforts already ongoing for professional development for teachers. Anytime you change a standard, anytime you change an assessment, anytime you change a curriculum, as a matter of fact, I think our teachers would agree, anytime you change resources, it probably does need some professional development. So a lot of districts had begun doing that even back early on. I know we had started even in 2006, 2007 with the Georgia performance standards, and then when the Common Core came in 2009, we just ratcheted that up to deal with the Common Core standards. Now, bear in mind that while the Common Core standards were higher, there was a lot of similarities with a lot of Georgia's performance standards because they had been worked on, they had been made more rigorous, they had been revised with an attempt to make them more engaging for students, and that's one of the keys to education. It's great to have a great curriculum, it's great to have good instructions, but if the students aren't engaged in the work, not a lot of learning goes on. So the engagement piece was very important. Common Core Standards is really focused on engaging students, and I think properly done in a classroom, we see where it does do that. The other thing I think is important, and one of the issues that I'll speak to, they said that this being, again, getting back to an overreach, a federal overreach, that Race to the Top was an attempt to really have districts approve the Common Core Standards or adopt the Common Core Standards. Not so. Nowhere in the Race to the Top application, nowhere did it require a state or district to adopt Common Core Standards. One of the four elements of Race to the Top was standards and assessment, meaning that you did need to make standards higher. Hopefully you make them more engaging, but it did not require Common Core Standards. It wasn't admitted. You might ask, well, how do you know that? Well, I was on Georgia's team that went to Washington twice. the Race to the Top team. Actually, the first time Governor Perdue went. Second time I went, Wanda Bars, who had Ms. Rice's position at the time as a state board chair. Ms. Bars was there both times, but never did never did adopting the Common Core standards come up as a requirement. But it did require, again, that the state adopt or be able to prove that it had adopted higher standards. You just didn't take what you had, okay? So that was one of the issues that I think gets some rhetoric sometimes that is simply not the case. Now, it was true that as you look at the other things that go on with Common Core and Race to the Top, it's a dumbing down of the curriculum. That's one of the other critics or criticisms that we hear about it. But it's simply not the case. It is fewer standards, but you teach them to a much higher level, a much deeper level, okay? As a matter of fact, I think in mathematics it actually cut the number of, Mr. Adams, I don't recall the exact number, but it probably cut the standards in about a third. But that was from the Georgia Performance Standards to the Common Core Standards, but it took a lot more time. It was more engaging, more application-based. That really is what the Common Core is all about, to really engage students and have them not only understand the conceptual understanding, but the mathematical understanding of math, and then how you can apply that to real life situations or other situations that to solve problems and issues. It also is to help establish what we hear a lot about today as 21st century skills, and many times the argument comes up: are you teaching content or are you teaching skills? I say you teach both. 21st century skills are really nothing more than creative thinking, being able to do creative, critical thinking, being able to be innovative, being able to work as a team, to collaborate. Those are the kinds of skills that it really calls for. To be analytical, read something and be able to synthesize and write back what it really said. And I think in doing so, we sometimes confuse that with the fact that the Common Core standards really are sort of out there. I contend, properly interpreted and properly taught, the Common Core standards will really engage more students, regardless of their ability level, than the standards that we had and been used to before. Now, moving on from that, let me say that the Race to the Top issue, and maybe someone else will cover some other points in that, but I would just like to say that as it relates to Race to the Top, I think that effort for this state has been overall one that we will see a lot of benefits of that in years to come. I think that has really caused us to not just, in the word of the term highly qualified came up earlier, meaning are the teachers, are they certified? Have they passed the test to teach? Race to the Top focused on teachers and leaders being effective. Are students learning? Do they know more at the end of the year than they did at the beginning of the year, and how much? Those are the kind of things that we want to make sure are happening in our classrooms, and I think that was one of the benefits, or is one of the benefits, and will continue to be one of the benefits of Race to the Top. So it's real easy, I think, for sometimes to get caught up in really the terminology that we speak of as bureaucratic power grabs, overreach, national control of children's education, the erosion of state rights, when in fact the Common Core standards just said that a state, if you adopt those, you choose to be consistent with 85% of those. You don't have to adopt them all. You can add to them. But as far as the curriculum, what instructions actually goes on in the classroom, that's left up to the purview of the teacher. I don't need to repeat. I thought they covered it very well. The resources that they use. But a lot of times teachers or parents will want to know, well, what are the type of things that students will read? I know those of us in here that's been educators for a number of years know that we've been trying to get away from reading all fiction. You know, reading is not a content area. You have to read content. We've said for years we ought to include more nonfiction reading. So Common Core, the standard requires that you read or you include other things other than just fiction. But it did not put out a list of things that had to be read. But it did say here is a suggested list of things that will get at what the standard calls that students should achieve, should know, and be able to do at the end. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is sort of my view of how the Common Core came into being, how Race to the Top has come along about that time. Y'all remember in 2009 when that came about through ARA, through the during the recession, and that there was money put into really a change in the formula how money goes to states. Generally speaking, any money dedicated to education, any money that's appropriate for education, is driven to the states by formula. Now that formula could be numbers of students, it could be the type of students, such as with Title I. It could be the condition or the environment of students, such as socioeconomics. But the Race to the Top did put it on a grant basis. In other words, you have to apply for it, and in applying for it, you have to indicate what is it that you're going to do to, again, raise the standards, improve the effectiveness of teachers and leaders. What are you going to do to turn around low-performing schools? What are you going to do to make better use of collecting and using data to improve instruction? Those were the four areas that it was built around. So with that, let me say that I really hope that at some point in time we can get through the rhetoric about what it is you either like or you don't like Common Core. If you think there is too much of a federal overreach, then you're probably not going, if you think Common Core is mandated in the federal government, you're probably not going to like Common Core. But let's make the argument on what's the value of it and what it really does, rather than what we think or what someone says it does in a political sense. This needs to be evaluated, but what is the educational value? What will this do for students, rather than political ideologies or ideologies that certain groups may have? And that's my plea to you, and hopefully you're able to ferret that out as you move forward with your study.
Mr. Wilbanks, just a couple of questions. I have first one is Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent. I have actually a twofold question. The first is I haven't heard any, we talk a lot in respects to the traditional student, but I haven't heard any mention of how we address our special needs students in regards to Common Core standards. The second question is, obviously you've told us about the history and the pros of Common Core. From your perspective, could you give me one idea of a challenge that you had and that you still have in regards to Common Core?
Very good question, and I think it's a challenge that you have anytime you change standards or you change assessments or you change curriculum. You have to make sure that the place where schools conduct their mission in the classroom, you have to make sure that the teachers in the classroom are able to deliver that in the manner that it needs to be delivered. All the teachers I know want to be successful. They want the curriculum, the standards to be such that it addresses what they believe students need to know. But then when it comes down to the curriculum piece, that's the interface between what the standard is and what the kids get every day. The activities that they get assigned and are engaged in, the assessments that they do, not just the standardized assessments such as CRCT or end of course tests, but yes, those too. But it's in the assessments that they give, and they want to know, is this going to be provided for them that will give them the ability to be successful.
Representative, did that get your question?
Oh, he did, but I asked about
Special ed,
needs.
okay.
Special needs.
Special ed.
Yes, sir.
The Fordham Institute, that's an independent think tank, and I have a reference to that if you need to look it up with me today. Actually, as it compared the standards in each of the states, as it made a comparison between the current standards, this would have been in the 07, 08, 09 time frame. They addressed that, and they made a generalized statement that said that the Common Core standards was just as appropriate for special needs students as other students. Our people, and when I say our, I'm talking about Gwinnett, we feel that was a true statement. I think if you get that document and see it, you certainly can pull it up. I'll be glad to give you the address of that. I think when they compared Georgia, remember Dr. Barge and Dr. Rycraft indicated those 6 states, when they pulled those 6 states' standards, they really did a big comparison of that, a thorough comparison of that. And I think Georgia actually scored a B+ in its current standards with what the Common Core would be. And maybe in math, maybe an A-. I'm not sure. But it didn't mean that any of them were perfect. There's always room for improvement, but the Common Core standards was an improvement in every category.
Mr. Chairman, just one.
All right, one follow-up. Okay.
One quick. And I appreciate that as well, but especially when we're talking about math, when we're talking autism, which is increasing over the years as early diagnosed, generally have an appreciation of math, but then when you get to English and comprehension and these types of things, there are some challenges and difficulties there. So I understand we may meet the standard from the math perspective, particularly talking about our kids with autism, but where are we at with the English language arts? And
I think that same statement by the Fordham Foundation that I quoted you would apply both for language arts as well as math. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a challenge, and as you know, or anybody in the room that knows anything about autism and autistic students, that is certainly a challenge. It is not simple. But the Common Core standards, for the most part, really involve students in more activities or engaging pieces that probably benefits a special ed student as much as any other student.
All right, Representative Brockway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wilbanks, thank you for coming today. Wanted to go back to something I asked earlier of Mr. Barge, and that is, when it gets to time to select curriculum, do you feel like that, maybe you could describe a little bit of that process on how you go about, how your system will go about selecting curriculum and selecting the resource materials that the teacher would use. But do you feel like, has the Common Core standards tied your hands and kept you from using some resources that you might want to use, but you can't because they don't align with Common Core? And then, also, if you describe briefly how you go about picking these things, and how much freedom does a teacher have in the classroom to use this or that material that might not necessarily be on a recommended list?
Good question. First of all, you asked me how we did it, and I'll be Gwinnett specific in that respect, okay? Anytime we're going to either change the curriculum or align the curriculum with standards, such as when we went from QCC, the Quality Core curriculum at the state level, we had to align our AKS curriculum, our Academic Knowledge and Skills curriculum, which is the essential curriculum for Gwinnett schools. We had to align that with the state standards. Common Core, Georgia Performance Standards, the same way. So with the adoption of the Common Core standards, we had to do another realignment. Now, we also do that with assessments, like we align it with ITBS, we align the curriculum with SAT, ACT, okay, other standardized tests. But how we go about doing that in terms of the curriculum changes or development, we have a committee of teachers. We normally select a teacher from every school. Sometimes it's just elementary, so you would only do a K-5, you would only do the elementary teachers. You would have your curriculum people involved with that as well. And that committee becomes a committee that looks at the content. Is it age appropriate? If it's an assessment, is this test item appropriate for the content, for the grade level? And those teachers are supposed to go back to their schools and involve their people with that. If it's math, they would make sure that every math person gets involved. All that comes together to whatever changes that needs to be made. We yearly have what we call a GEMS Oversight Committee. That's a committee of 100 people, 100 plus. We just did that this past February. Half of those 100 people are outside of the school. They're parents or business people, but primarily most would be parents, okay? And that is reviewed with them. Here's the changes, here's our current curriculum, here are the changes, the additions or deletions or modifications that we intend to make. They spend, sometimes it's a day, depending on how many, sometimes a day and a half, doing that. And then that comes back, those recommendations come back, and then the curriculum people put that together, and then that's brought to me, and then we bring that to the board to approve that. In terms of the instructional resources that go, the textbooks or the digital content that goes with that, we would, and I think somebody here mentioned earlier, you invite vendors to give you what their products are. They bring them in, and the committees look at them. They select it down to what they're recommending. Sometimes they do the top 2 or 3 and then bring a smaller group of teachers in to get it down to 1. And then that's put on display. Somebody mentioned that they'd done that before. Not many people show up. We actually do have some people that come, not a lot. The room doesn't get crowded. But what we tried to do lately is we try to put it in a place where people are attracted to come. For example, our art displays. We display that, so you have to walk through where the instructional materials are to get to the art exhibit, so a lot of people see it that way. The exception being our health curriculum. We actually have a committee on the health curriculum that actually look at and approve. That committee approves those books or text or instructional materials. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be a pamphlet, a monogram, or a video or whatever. And that's basically how that gets approved. It gets brought to the board for final approval. Dr. Barnes did mention if the state has selected ABC textbook for mathematics, let's just say we don't like ABC textbook, we like DEF textbook. Well, we can buy as many as we want to as long as we pay for it, but you can't use state money unless it's on the state approved list. Now, back to the list that people put out. The Common Core does suggest the type materials that you would want to involve students with. The state involves, I think Dr. Rycraft showed a slide where it said, for this subject area, here's some things we would suggest you use, or for meeting this standard, here's some instructional materials that you would use. We certainly do that, and one of the things that we found, and I certainly agree with this, the right to select what strategy or what activity you choose in the classroom should be left up to the classroom teacher. And sometimes occasionally you'll get a teacher that makes a bad choice on one of those. But I've found 99.9% of the time they make as good a choices or better than those who put those lists together. So we do say that it's good to have a list to choose from because actually, particularly for new teachers, veteran teachers need a list. Veteran teachers come up with their own list. They really care less about who's got a list. They sort of know how to come up with their list. New teachers probably appreciate having a list. And particularly if it's a new curriculum, new instructional materials, it probably channels people to be more focused on really the movement of the goal you're looking toward.
Let me call on Chairman Rogers.
Mr. Wilbanks, thank you for being here. I've heard a lot about you, but I've never seen you other than in the newspaper, so appreciate your words.
As long as you don't find me in an obituary column, I'm okay.
I do read those religiously, too. You have how many students in Gwinnett County? 175,000?
Not quite. They tell me this year we'll have 172. 353, I think, is the number they're giving me, but I think we'll probably go over that.
How many elementary schools do you have?
We have 78.
Do you go to all of them once a year, or every other year? Or?
Not once a year, but I go as often as I can. I have never had as a goal to just go to the school for a visit. I do like to go to schools and meet with everybody.
Yeah.
I try to do that before.
How many high schools do you have?
We have 19 high schools. 19
high schools, okay. My question to you is, you've been in the classroom. How long ago has it been since you've been in the classroom?
As a teacher?
Yes, sir.
I left the classroom, and you asked the question now. I left the classroom.
You look a little older than me. I'm not sure you are or not, but
I'll agree with that. I left the classroom in 68.
Good gracious. Okay. Long time. So you've been in administration ever since?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many deputy superintendents do you have?
None.
You're the only one?
No. I don't have any deputy superintendents.
You got any assistants?
I have some associate superintendents.
Okay, excuse me.
I have 3 associate superintendents.
Okay.
And then I have division heads that head up the operating division, like facilities and operations, business and finance, facility, technology, and information management technology.
Okay. Demographics have changed a lot, I'm sure, in Gwinnett County. And
when I became superintendent in 1996, our free and reduced lunch rate was 14%. I think it's right now probably, well, I'd have to give you last year's. I don't know what this year's will be. I can pretty well guarantee you won't be any less. It was like 57%.
Yeah. Yeah.
We became a minority school district in January of 2004.
Right.
Right today, or end of last year, our student enrollment demographics was 32% African American, 28% Hispanic, 29% Caucasian, 12% Asian.
Interesting. Okay. Let me ask you a question that I hear, being a part-time legislator, and I'm not a superintendent or a teacher or a principal or whatever, but I have this happen to me quite a bit, and I think Chairman Coleman's had it, and we've seen it in meetings. When I have a young parent come to me, and I'm sure they come to you about their children being scared of Common Core, how do you answer that? Do you tell them to go homeschool them or go to a private school? But how do you convince them to stay in the Gwinnett County school system?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't really try to walk that parent through becoming less fearful of that. I refer them back to the school, to that teacher who can really do that, okay? Because,
do you instruct the principal on how to do it?
Yeah. Well, I hope I wouldn't have to instruct them. I hope they would automatically do that. That's what we're about. That's what we should do. And to me, that's I guess the responsibility of the school to make sure that the students and parents understand what is it that the student will learn this year. That's usually given out at the first of school. On parent nights, curriculum nights, but I also have heard of some instances of that, and a lot of times it happened early on. I think actually more of it probably than Common Core came up with integrated math. We had teachers did not have the appropriate resources. There's actually nothing wrong with integrated math. As a matter of fact, I don't know how you feel about it. You are a math teacher, I believe, Justin. Probably your master teachers can teach integrated math, but the average teacher probably does a much better job with what we call discrete mathematics, algebra. Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, so forth and so on. And probably would rather teach that than integrated, but we probably had more of that type of thing on the integrated than we have on the Common Core, but it's getting used to teaching that in a way that's different. There is a transformation that's going on in the classroom. One of the big things, and if you go back to 2005 when the National Government Association wanted to redesign high school, all the data was showing that the students that were dropping out said they were bored. Now, I don't think that's justified in every case. However, I think we do have to make sure that students in classes are engaged in what's going on in the class, in the work. And I think the Common Core really, as a curriculum, has that as one of the, I guess, the underpinning components of it. It does involve students properly taught in activities that reinforces their learning. It's not just a recall. Gosh, yeah, I understand that. And not only does it apply here, it applies somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me follow up one other question. But my concern, not being an educator like you and like half the panel is or was, what do you tell a parent? How do you convince a parent that public education is okay with the Common Core standards and curriculum we have today? Where do we take them? Where do we direct them to? Where do you direct them to convince them that it's okay that the sky's not falling?
Good question. We have tried to put together and I'm sure other school districts do the same thing. Some information sheets on what it means to what the classroom looks like in a Common Core Georgia Performance Standard School District. Okay? What does the teacher do? What does the student do? And we try to break that down in very clear, concise, compelling language. Needs to be short. Can't be a lot of pages. Matter of fact, goes over one page, probably not going to work. But it also has to be something that I think you have as your goal. 90% of the kids are educated in public schools, have been ever since they've been keeping up with it, no matter what comes along. The home schools, charter schools, whatever. I think there are 50.1 million students headed to school this year. 90% of those will be, actually there's more than that, there's about 54 million, but I think about 90% of that 54 will be public school, K-12 public school students. And we have got to make sure that we have the confidence of parents as well as the interest of students. And I think interest is one of the things that the Common Core standards will help appeal to. It makes it a little more relevant. Remember the 3 R's that came along, rigor, relationships, and relevance. Making it tied to something that they can understand. Make a connection between that mathematical concept and just what's 3 into 2 or 3 into 6 or whatever it happens to be.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. We have 2 more questions, then we're going to move on because we want to keep on schedule. All right. Let's see. All right. Representative Jaspers.
Thank you, Chairman Coleman. Mr. Wilbanks, this is a sort of following Chairman Rogers' question, answering a question we get from home. You know, when we're in the grocery store, just doing that retail politics thing, you made a statement that early on about Peachtree Ridge, and you really emphatically wanted us to understand that the U.S. Department of Education was not there. And so I guess that's, you're telling us that, or you're wanting to say, or we're supposed to, the people, to believe that there really wasn't any involvement by the federal government in the refining of Common Core standards or the creation of them. And that's a question we get a lot. And I think there's a lot of, you may be very positive things that was good about it, but people believe there were. And it's absolutely, you know, they see that the organizations, maybe the Council of Chief State Elected Officers and the American Federation of Teachers, they get their information on standard development from somebody. You know, was it the Federal Department of Education? I mean, I want you to kind of just expound on your saying that they weren't involved in it, but I think there's evidence that there were.
I was responding to the allegation that you just reinforced, that people say, well, this is an overreach by the U.S. Department of Education. It's the U.S. Department of Education determining curriculum for schools. The Common Core Standards was an initiative that grew out of the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, okay? And they moved that forward, their staff, their association, with the other associations that I mentioned. And the point I was making, I think, you know, this goes back to a long history of things, and I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but they tried to go with, have common standards for social studies. And boy, did that one run amok, because there's so many areas where you can latch onto that. So the governors felt a need to really improve education. We were doing it.
Hang on. We don't need to repeat that. I understand that part of it. Right. But I want you to go back to, you're saying that the Federal Department of Education really wasn't at the table. But I understand what you're saying about the need and how it evolved. But That's where I'm coming from.
Well,
I think that's what people want to know.
I don't know of any other way of putting it other than just to tell you, sir, that there was no one from the U.S. Department of Education there, okay? Now, they could have all been sick.
Well, that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, were they involved in the creation of those standards?
They were not involved in any official capacity with the development of the Common Core standards, okay?
Okay.
Right. I have no
Thank
evidence whatsoever that they were.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, one last question is, let's see, number 8. Misty.
It's more a comment as a parent. One of my children has special needs, so related to your question about Common Core, I'm much more concerned about the individual education plan, the IEP, which relates more to his ability to learn and at what pace and at what goals we're going to focus on for him for the year versus the Common Core. So I'm not saying that those standards don't exist, but just as all children learn differently, the dramatic spectrum of students who would have special needs, multiply that even, even more. So that IEP, I think, is critical, even more so than what the Common Core requirements would be of special needs students.
Right. Would agree. Is that it?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. We appreciate it. And I don't know if you're going to be around, but if you have any more questions, talk with him. Now, we have about